a video, did a video to really share the collaboration with Renaissance. And this is where, Global Chamber as the larger fit around everything else, all these real estate groups and companies with Renaissance. And Paul, I'm going to have to get you very active because that's where that company is mostly out of the Middle East and Europe. So when we launch the partnership, we're going to do a lot of education training, plugging in services. So this is Doug, what we were thinking with the Global Chamber as you have such a large overlay, but there are so many real estate organizations and companies that want to plug into what Renaissance is doing. And then we leverage with what everyone else is doing well to have a specialty. And that's why introducing Paul, no one knows Europe and probably the rest of the world better than Paul Danks. So I'm just excited that he's here, Doug. Doug, do you want to kick it off? And then I'll introduce our guest speaker for today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. And thank you, Jim, for those kind comments and also observation that certainly our goal has historically been very business focused, connecting businesses to connections that will grow their business, typically clients. It could also be business resources. And so what we've ended up doing is create 605 chapters around the world. And the ideal chapter has an advisory board, typically roughly 10% of the membership. Phoenix, it turns out to be about 50 people on the advisory board and somewhere between 500 and 1,000 members, organizational members of Global Chambers. So our focus is mainly the exporters as the core, people who have products and services that they're exporting, or generally less on the importing side, more on the exporting side, and then on the investment side. So as we've migrated from exporting and added investment, the some of the functions, and in particular real estate, has become more and more important because we've always connected exporters with governments and the economic development groups. Those have always been key aspects of what Global Chamber's been about. But then as FDI has increased, not just in the US, but around the world, there's really a strong linkage between the business side, the government or private public-private partnership side that are doing the economic development, either to help people leave or people to come and land, and real estate. And so Jim and Ellen have been so brilliant in terms of understanding that synergy and the value that hopefully we can bring more of to what they're doing. And so thank you for the collaboration, Jim and Ellen. Thank you, all of you, for attending here today. We're going to continue, and once Ellen recovers, we have a date to get together and plan out the next weeks and months so that as the platform comes up, that Jim, you've been working on with so many people, that we are pulling our weight and adding the right kinds of opportunities so that ultimately what we share are deals. We're certainly, many people in Global Chamber are in it for the globalness and being part of it. We had a meeting this morning, an internal meeting, and one person actually said, I am Global Chamber. And another one said, Global Chamber, it's a part of who I am. And I think what they're saying is when you have a global mindset, when you think globally, there's something different than when you're in a local little networking group. Not that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing and it's essential. But Global Chamber is everywhere, across all functions, across all countries and all cultures. And some people relate to that. Some people don't. And the people that do are part of Global Chamber. And they also tend to be people who want to do work and do business and not waste time and do deals and have fun stuff like that. Jim is one of those guys. He's an amazing leader. He's so positive. He's just great to be around. Ultimately, though, he's doing deals for others. And he knows that some of that comes back. So he's a high road leader. Thank you so much, Jim, for that. And we look forward to contributing looking forward to the conversation today too, to learn more about what Paul is doing and find ways to collaborate.
Doug, and thank you for having the vision a long time ago when you were traveling for a different capacity, and then you were looking for Chamber of Commerce, which we know that it's a brick and mortar. And like I said, nothing bad. I was part of the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce, and also with LA, and I got to see what they did with brick and mortar, but there were limitations because of the expenses and other things that they were trying to accomplish that was kind of prohibitive. But having now this virtual world and world to grow and the vision and the collaboration that you dug. Remember when we were looking, it was we kept on saying about less than 500, but then you had to redo your stats with over 100,000 members and 605 metros in so many different areas and region. And I said when I saw it with Ellen, one thing that touches every part and every aspect of this business that Global Chamber has is really in real estate, whether it's transactional, whether it's leasing, development, moving capital around, right? Especially now after the tariffs, the supply chain has been changing. And I would even say it started way back in the 80s or even before that. And probably Paul can share more. And the COVID and all these things that have really disrupted and changed the world, that now you do need to look at things globally if you're playing import, export, supply chain, and just moving things around, right? It is a global world. And real estate touches everything. So when we saw this, I said, you know what, Doug, thank you for that vision to give us that opportunity to plug in the Renaissance network and all of our collaboration so we can be one family sharing resources, but really the understanding. And we hope with Global Chamber, as we plug in a way to send referrals, is using Global Chamber economic development partnerships all around the world. So we can have a library of speakers and contacts that you can speak with and know what is really going on around the world. Just like Ruby in Africa. I mean, there are just so many great people to find out what is going on from research reports, data, to then collaborating with the local boots on the ground individuals that we trust. And that's the biggest one that we trust to do an immense amount of business. So I see what is going to happen, Doug, with Global Chamber, with the real estate, with so many organizations and trade groups. This really is just the beginning and the formation of being one big family, especially in real estate. And I'm just really proud to be a part of it with Ellen Sue, who's under the weather. But thank you, Ellen. But through all of this journey, with Paul Danks, and I know introduced from Jeff Finn, who's a legend in commercial real estate, owning NAI Global, and then now a technology company with RealNext. That's how I got to introduce Paul, who also is, and I won't take too much of your thunder, Paul, a president, a leader in so many trade organizations you can see with some designation. But I'll let Paul share a little of his background and really discussing Europe and opportunities on a regional area of the world. So, Paul, if you don't mind sharing your background with everyone with Global Chamber, and really, what are you seeing in Europe and maybe opportunities of how, as we have people all around the world on this call and watching us, maybe you could tell people why Europe, how Europe, and maybe where is other things from Europe going to other regions of the world. So, Paul, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Um, Jim, thank you for that. I'm more than happy to do that. So, how long do you want me to speak for? 5 minutes, something like that?
You have as long or as little as you want, but
Ah,
hopefully longer to present and share, as
right.
much as you want to say, Paul, please.
Okay. Okay. Well, I have prepared some notes. So let me just sort of briefly introduce myself. So, as Jim says, I'm Paul Danks. I'm the international representative on the global board of the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors (SIOR). I'm also the European Managing Director of Renaissance Global Network. As Jim was outlining, my background actually goes back over 40 years, and Jeff Finn and I have worked together at NEI Global. Firstly, when I was at the leading the relationship with NEI when we were the UK member firm, and then latterly, post as having sold that business to BNP Paribas Real Estate, I then came back to work with Jeff as the European Managing Director. But For virtually all of my career, I've worked with international corporates, mainly with international corporate occupiers, and particularly in the industrial and logistics sector. I've also managed relationships of, for example, Newmark Knight Frank, the relationship that Newmark had with Knight Frank, and then prior to that, I managed the relationship that BNP Paribas had with Cresa in the USA. But mainly leading the global corporate service teams with a particular focus on international occupiers, as I say, mainly in the industrial and logistics sector. And to go back to where I started, so now I represent international on the global board of SIOR. Just a little bit of a summary about where we see things in Europe at the moment. So firstly, the good news. If you look at Europe, but looking at the example of the UK, earlier this year, a real estate market sentiment survey was undertaken by the UK Real Estate Investment Infrastructure Forum in partnership with Holistic Insights to provide a comprehensive snapshot of current attitudes and priorities within the UK's built environment and infrastructure sectors. Now, over 10,000 people, mainly real estate professionals, responded to this survey. So it was one of the largest sentiment surveys of its kind ever undertaken. And in particular, it explored market confidence for the year ahead. It also identified key challenges facing the sector. And just to highlight for you some of the key takeaways. So 70% of the real estate professionals surveyed now have a much more positive outlook for the year ahead. That's up 18 percentage points on the prior year survey. Whereas negative sentiment on the markets had dropped from 17% to just over 6%. And looking at the UK, across every region, a significant increase in positive sentiment was actually registered. As I say, with relatively little negative sentiment on the market, looking forward over the next 12-month period. And if I just highlight the top 5 key challenges that the recipients to the survey suggested they are concerned about at the moment. Top of the list was geopolitical instability, and that sort of goes back to Jim's observation about global supply chains and potential fragility of those supply chains. Secondly, again, across Europe, across the world, inflation and increasing costs. Particular to the UK is the UK quite strict planning system, zoning system. Then there's a whole issue about the political stability of various countries, and you have it in the USA. We're seeing it in Europe with whether you're leaning left. The whole political landscape is uncertain. And then what I wanted to particularly just talk about is regulatory uncertainty, and in particular ESG and sustainability compliance. That featured very, very highly as a major area of concern with the recipients to the survey that I referred to earlier. And in particular, I think it's worthy of me just saying a few words about the impact of the EU Taxonomy Regulation on commercial real estate. Now, many people might have heard the word EU Taxonomy, but they're not. You won't be necessarily clear as to what it means. So if I just start by just outlining what it actually is. So it's an EU-wide classification system defining what counts as an environmentally sustainable economic activity, and it's designed to direct capital towards low carbon and climate resilient assets. Now, why it matters in particular for real estate is that buildings are responsible for 36% of the European Union carbon emissions. And the taxonomy introduces very strict energy efficiency and climate criteria. and real estate therefore becomes a central sector for compliance and capital allocation. Now, if we turn to look at some of the key impacts that we feel that EU taxonomy will have on commercial real estate, first of all, there is a higher disclosure requirement. So real estate companies and investors and lenders must report the proportion of their activity that are taxonomy aligned. And this pushes property owners to gather detailed data on energy performance, carbon intensity, renovation plans, and building certification. Secondly, it increases pressure to improve building performance. The taxonomy legislation itself sets strict criteria for new construction, renovation, acquisition, and ownership. And it's often tied to primary energy demand thresholds being set, EPC ratings for buildings, often requiring top national performance tiers ratings. That's high ratings of EPC in terms of the issuing of EPC rating certificates to buildings. And there's necessity to demonstrate alignment with near zero energy building standards. So what's the result of all of that? It's putting pressure upon owners to upgrade their assets or face classification as non-green assets. Thirdly, what we're seeing is capital flows are shifting towards high-performing assets. The reason for that is that investors and lenders want taxonomy, it's a very hard word to say, that is, taxonomy-aligned portfolios. Green buildings may therefore enjoy better access to finance. Brown non-green assets face generally higher borrowing costs, valuation risk, and potential discounting. And taxonomy alignment becomes a competitive differentiator for capital attraction. The fourth impact is on valuation and market liquidity. Valuers are increasingly consider sustainability alignment as a fundamental aspect of asset quality. And this leads to higher valuations for efficient green buildings. It leads to depreciation risk for non-aligned stock, and it leads to reduced liquidity for older, poor performing assets. And fifthly, there's the influence on development and renovation strategies. To remain investable, for buildings to remain investable, developers and asset managers are integrating into the construction process low carbon materials. They're pursuing very deep, detailed retrofits over light refurbishments of buildings. They're aligning design with taxonomy technical screening criteria from the early stages. And renovation strategies are therefore shifting towards heavy energy performance building upgrades. What we're seeing also across Europe is more scrutiny of green claims, greenwashing. A taxonomy provides a standardization definition for sustainable buildings, therefore reducing greenwashing. Marketing materials, sustainability funds, and ESG labeled products now need to match technical criteria set down. And what we're seeing also is the increased operational and administrative burden. So collecting the required data for energy use, recording embodied carbon, producing climate risk assessments, etc., all demand new systems and expertise, and from very experienced real estate professionals such as we and our teams are able to deliver, not just across Europe, but indeed across the world. But all of that increases compliance cost, but it also improves long-term asset transparency. So really just looking at it overall, so the EU taxonomy legislation is reshaping commercial real estate by redirecting capital towards sustainable assets, forcing upgrades to buildings, and embedding energy efficiency into lending, development, and reporting practices. It accelerates the divide between future-proofed green assets and vulnerable brown building stock. So in short, real estate advisors are acting now on multiple fronts to help their clients meet EU taxonomy obligations and to take advantage of the opportunities that it creates. And therefore, what sort of services are being provided? Technical audits, strategic planning, obviously being carried out. Data platforms are being installed and upgraded. Training's being put in place. All of which to actually help the members of the real estate profession advise their clients in order to help them identify the actions that they can take across their portfolios. And just by way of example, we're currently working with one major logistics client. We've just done this, they've got that the particular client's got about 1,100 properties across Europe. We've just carried out a pilot exercise looking at a sample of about 30 assets in the UK, where we've carried out a desktop analysis looking at those buildings to determine whether they indeed are compliant, not just with legislation, but also with the US corporates' own internal sustainability policies and guidance. And we've identified just on that sample alone something like the potential to reduce cost by reduce operational cost by over 20%, and we're about to embark on a much more detailed analysis of a wider sample of buildings, with a view to rolling out building improvements across the European portfolio. I think the other thing I would add that often, excuse me, but often, particularly in leasehold properties, it's very easy to make the mistake and say, well, you know, this is not something that I'm going to deal with, whether you're the landlord or whether you're the tenant. It is actually more a matter of actually both parties working together, because particularly from a tenant perspective, when it comes up to, particularly in the UK with rent reviews, but in mainland Europe in particular, where albeit UK leases are much shorter now, but typically leases in mainland Europe are shorter than UK leases. When you come up to lease renewal, the ability of the occupier tenant to actually have data available to them, and actually to already have a plan of improvements that they want the landlord to carry out to the building, in order to induce the tenant to remain in occupation, is a very useful tool to have in hand. And it works the other way as well from the landlord's perspective. It's important for the landlord to know what they can do to the building to improve the building, some of which costs they might be able to pass on to the tenant, but at least both parties are in a position of strength when they go into negotiations on rent reviews or lease renewals. So there's clearly benefits to both parties, and not least for the landlord, the benefit of increasing the overall asset value of buildings within their portfolio. And one further thing I would add, I was at Expo Real in Munich in October, and there was quite a lot of discussion there about sustainability. And I was listening to one of the panel sessions where you've got representatives of international investors, developers, and occupiers, and one particular phrase particularly summed up the overall view of, is it my problem? Do I need to deal with sustainability? And what was said is, actually, it's very simple. We regard it as a license to operate. And if you don't take these matters very seriously, you won't be able to operate your business in that building anymore. That is a detriment, obviously, to the occupational tenant, but a particular detriment to the owner of the building that doesn't want to have an empty building. So, you know, this legislation is having a major impact across the whole of Europe, and indeed, particularly in international developers, you know, the Prologises of this world, the Panettones of this world, even across the USA in particular, take it very seriously, and are requiring that their buildings meet very high construction standards nowadays. So it is a major issue in Europe. but approached in the right way, there's considerable benefits to all parties. So it's a bit of a skip through some quite complicated legislation there, but I hope that gave a reasonable picture of something very important that's taking place across Europe.
And Paul, would you say Europe is really spearheading this the ESG and the sustainability versus the rest of the world or different regions currently?
Yeah, very much so. It's not just Paul or Jim saying this. You talk to any of the, particularly the developers. You talk to the Panettones and Prologises of this world. They will absolutely say to you, it's our European business. We take it very seriously, but it is our European business leads that are taking the lead, and that's funneling back into the operations in the USA and the rest of the world. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so I would see the development or the brown to rehab or consistently with the new development has to be up standards. And because of the money and the investments, I'm sure the investment dollars coming out of Europe will need to have that component, let's say up to a certain degree in the US or in other parts of the world. Do they have those, I guess, additions to what they will invest in from Europe now into other
Yeah,
countries?
yeah, very much. I mean, I suppose, Jim, it's all about risk profile, isn't it? And if you've got an asset that you've got a contingent inbuilt risk, then it is by definition it is becoming a risky asset. And as I say, the risk factor is driven by regulation, but it's also driven by corporate policy, be it occupier head office corporate policy, albeit bank lending criteria corporate policy, albeit the investment committee on a major international investor and their corporate policy in terms of what they're prepared to invest in moving forward. So it impacts internationally, Jim. You're quite right.
Yeah, and we know in the US it all changes here and there besides tweets or different things that happens because I know there was a big push for a while in ESG sustainability, but maybe I'll add Jeff in on this, right? It's kind of on hold, right? And because of that and certain, I would say, uncertainties, many of the other regions or world are skeptical, right, about US or cautious, I would say. Jeff, you want to add something and maybe introduce yourself too about this since I know you have global contacts and you have these discussions worldwide.
Uh, I'm sorry, Jim. I got onto something else for a second. I got distracted for a minute. I apologize. But please introduce myself and say hello. Yeah, I've
Yes.
worked with Jim and Paul for many years, as Paul mentioned. But clearly, there are um, increasing levels of demand and expectations with regard to sustainability and implementation of green strategies. And it's not just in Europe, but it's globally. The expectations are elevated. So it is. Yeah, it's been going on in the States since LEED came about. The buildings that are, if you look at it even from the office market today, people talk about the challenges that the office market has had over this past cycle of people coming back to work and in in Manhattan and in other major business centers today. It's not a as nearly a problem in the A class, world class business centers that have built the amenities, built the green standard, built the sustainability standards. That's the expectation of corporate occupiers today. But the older buildings, the B class buildings, the ones that haven't reinvested are in a difficult situation. So there's a massive opportunity in the rehabilitation of those properties to come up to a global standard, or they become obsolete. Clearly, I mean, it was perhaps not as well adopted early as it was in Europe, but it is now, yeah, an expectation, and it's going to be a bifurcation of the market where those that have met a standard will succeed, and those that have not will ultimately be obsolete.
And Doug, I want to bring you in to maybe ask some questions because I know you have all these globally. discussing, investment dollars, but are really from the import export economic development. What kind of are you seeing and having discussions with these large, I'd say groups or companies at this point?
So, uh, certainly strong interest in understanding and being compliant. That's important, and finding tips and techniques to be able to be successful. So, Paul, it sounds like you're able to help them navigate that. Are you working with a lot of folks inbound, and where are you seeing most of the activity?
I mean, we're working, under the Renaissance Global banner, but I work very closely with one of our strategic partners, BE Design Group, where until recently I was non-executive chairman. And we're working right the way across Europe, literally in every European country, and indeed back into the States. We've been working on a project for a major international occupier in Florida, and because the base criteria is outside of all the regulation difference between the different countries, the base criteria of what you need to do and what a building is the same almost anywhere in the world. Different construction methods and so on, but the base criteria that needs to be complied with is the same. I think that the big challenge for a lot of companies, and where they just sort of throw their hands up in the air to start with and say, "Oh, it's too complicated," is they say, "Well, we haven't got the data." Well, actually, you have got the data. What you don't know is how to access that data. And now, and this is where the benefit of AI and everything else comes in, we now have tools that we can pull the data sets in externally from the providers of services, energy providers to buildings and so on, pull the data sets in and then carry out detailed analysis of that data to produce initial desktop recommendations to clients across whole portfolios of properties, which identifies, buildings that have a particularly high energy use for no particular reason, and we can put in place strategies to actually reduce operational costs. And that can be done anywhere across the world. But I think the thing is, a lot of people, as I said earlier, a lot of people still switch off when you start to talk about sustainability and so on. But when you look at it from the point of view that to maintain the investment value, if you're an owner, to ensure that you can continue to operate, if you're an occupier, it's so crucially important. You can't ignore it. And the sort of the penny has dropped. And in fairness to a lot of my colleagues in the real estate professions across the states, they realise that. But many of you will know that the European market and advisors is yes, we are very good and successful brokers, but we tend to be more also consultancy and advisory based rather than just pure let's get the next deal done type scenario. And working with my colleagues across the states, that there is this realization that despite whatever the complexion of the time is, and their level of attention to this, it's something that you can't ignore.
You mentioned a couple firms, Newmark and Cressa, both of whom are
Yeah,
members of Global Chamber. How do
yeah.
you manage through that? Are you an agnostic supporter with these custom solutions you're talking about, or do you have affiliations that limit the way you interact with the different folks, or are you working mainly on custom projects? How does that work for you? And any ideas there just to give us some more clarity?
Well, we're to pick up the word you use there. We are actually agnostic, and if you just look at it on a country by country basis, what we do is work with whom we consider to be the best in class provider in that particular country. Now, as it happens, as I've outlined, I have a network of contacts through NAI Global. I have a network of contacts through my relationship with and my position with with SIOR. I equally have a network of contacts. For example, I have one of my former Cressa colleagues who's now an independent in the Netherlands, working on a major project for me in the Netherlands at the moment. And in Poland, for example, I work with my SIR partners who are leading a leading independent firm of about 80 or so people across Poland. So it's definitely best in class for the country or for the sector or for the particular type of advice that is needed.
Okay. How do these deals come to you? Are they coming in through private investors? Are they coming through government or economic development? Presumably all of them, but how do you see the most important lead source and deal source?
You're quite right. They come from all of those sources, but the majority come from relationships. And as I said, that for me, that goes back over and goes back over 40 years. So most of it comes from relationships, but it also comes from, and you will be well familiar with this, Doug. It all comes from being present, like, for example, being present at the chamber meeting that you held in London. So next week, I've got a follow-up meeting with the person I was sitting next to, who is a venture capitalist, etc., etc. We're sitting down and chatting next week. Tomorrow, I'm going to, as it happens, I'm going to a whole day sustainability conference in London. So you know what it's like. You just never know who you're going to be sitting next to, and you never know who you're going to be talking to.
Is that true, Jim?
I think so, Doug. When we did the CCC event in Beverly Hills, right, the immense amount of people we've met and the follow-up, like all of us who do virtual events, speak online, but there's always something different when you show up. And like as Paul said, sitting next to a venture capital, that's where the relationship, because on Zoom, sometimes you don't have those interactions, those casual or just coincidental discussions, right? That just happens to be next to you. And it goes to so many different directions. And I know being present, showing up, virtual is great because we can touch and we can talk to so many people. But if you don't go to the live events, you're really missing out, because I'm still trying to catch up with everyone in Beverly Hills. And it was just fantastic. And everyone's, what's next? But maybe I
Uh,
open up.
Doug, I have to tell you though, nobody's ever going to catch up with Jim.
Yeah, and yeah, it would hurt your health to try to keep up.
Come
Jim,
on.
one more question, and then absolutely, let's turn it over. Donna Smiley
Yes.
is in the audience, and she is a young, talented, well-connected already, very globally minded leader in commercial real estate in the Atlanta region. And so, my question, maybe Paul, to you would be, what's your advice for someone like that, younger and talented, and wanting to be connected, and has the kind of the Jim Huang kind of capability to connect and to be present and to take those kind of relationships to the next level? What would you recommend for Donna? And Donna, I don't know whether you're able to come off on and be in the meeting at this moment, but if you can, welcome. What do you suggest, Paul, to the young people that you know in the field?
I think as we're just saying, the thing is to be present, and as much as we do what we're doing now, it is actually to physically be present and go and see. And
Yep.
so for example, we had the SIOR fall conference in Louisville 2 weeks ago, and the SIOR has something which is called the SIOR Foundation, and the foundation supports young people, in particular young professionals, students from across the world, in terms of supporting them both financially in terms of their university programs that they might be doing, but also providing them with small grants to attend the SIR conferences, where they then have the opportunity to meet people of their own age, quite frankly, because we must have had at the conference, we must have had about 25 people turned up. I think the youngest was 18. And I was just chatting, and very bright people. And so, in the States, you have much more of a mentoring philosophy. In Europe, we tend to do it, but sort of don't talk about it in the same way. If that makes any sense, you seem to have more formal processes for mentoring in the States, but we definitely do that. People such as Ruby work alongside us. We take them to events, so we invite them to events, and just generally, continue to, if an opportunity arises, and it's not too much in terms of costs, the answer usually is yes. I will go. I will turn up.
I just want to
Yes.
add with Donna, she's not only a badass and a producer and everything in the States, but she's super connected in India. But Donna, if you don't mind sharing and definitely connecting with everyone after
Yeah.
this.
Sorry. Yes, I already sent Paul a request, and I was literally going to ask if y'all could connect me. So thank you so much. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm in the car headed to an
Yep.
economic development event right now. So I'm based in Atlanta. I've been in commercial real estate for 10 years. I work with Indian companies on cross-border opportunities. We actually have a manufacturing trade fair going on in Atlanta, February 9th through the 11th. I am transitioning more into industrial. I actually already have my SIOR certificates. I went through all the
Oh,
education,
good.
passed the exam, and I have the certification. The problem, I don't have the portfolio yet, and I also need a mentor. And someone was going to mentor me here, the SIOR president, a few years ago, but he was not able to do so. So I've been kind of in limbo, and that's why I was going to ask James and Doug to introduce me to you. I kind of been in limbo of finding a mentor to help me, navigate, that sector, because it is a very different sector compared to what I'm used to. But I'm very hungry. I know a lot of people, a lot of connections here in Atlanta. So yeah, it's just a matter of having the right mentor through the process to get to where I'm going with industrial. And with my connections to India, they're manufacturing, it all just makes sense.
Okay, well, we can help you with that. So you've dropped a note to LinkedIn to me. You've dropped a connection, yeah?
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
excellent. Okay,
Yes, I
okay. Well,
did.
I will come back to you. I will come back to you, and
Thank you.
I can suggest one or two people. Ideally, it should perhaps be somebody locally to Atlanta. But yeah, I'm more than happy to do that, Donna.
Thank you so much. And thank you, James. And thank you, Doug. And this is an amazing call. I'm listening but driving.
Well, Donna, that's what you do. You multitask. You're there, you're everywhere. And also, Doug, and I think everyone, she's part of CCC, knows Chris Mayer very well too. And this is isn't it surprising that all the people always show up, know the same people, right, that are active. But Donna, I would just say by knowing Paul opens up a lot of doors. He knows everybody, so you'll be in great hands. And I think Paul, you'll see that right for Donna getting her pin at SIR maybe very soon. Hopefully, using Paul as a recommendation now as you connect.
Yeah, absolutely,
That would be
absolutely.
amazing. Thank you guys so much.
So, Ruby, can you speak a little of what's going on in Africa, especially with ESG and sustainability? Are you able to speak, Ruby?
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe,
maybe not.
maybe not.
Yeah. But, this is the thing, Paul, where what you're speaking about sparks investment, development, rehab all around the world, not just in Europe, not just in North America, Latin America, Asia, and where we can do it. So we're very excited to plug this into Global Chamber as we start building what Global Chamber I think is very powerful is the people, the research information, using and collaborating with so many different organizations to really expand. And I know, Paul, just think about it with SIR, with yourself, because many of Global Chamber is logistics and the referrals and leads with Cesar, Doug, they know everyone about business and where everything is moving around. Doug, we were always talking about how not only on brokerage, but maybe the services, how to expand, because definitely what Paul does fits with everything Global Chamber needs right now especially on his SIOR with the I, the industrial, right, and the office and warehouse space.
On the ESG side, let's see, it's 8 a.m. here. So in 5 hours, we have what would have been an in-person event on ESG in Beverly Hills, actually, again,
Okay.
Jim,
Yeah.
with one of our partners, Anand Singh, who is very deeply connected in the VC and angel and private investor world of Southern California and Northern California, and I think beyond, but I'm most familiar with his work in both. So he does periodic, every 2 or 3 months, special conversations with investors. And it's usually businesses that are pitching what they have. So today there is a global chamber panel where we have 6 companies. The overall theme is around COP30 and connecting to the climate leadership forum that's down in Brazil. I believe it's already started, but I think a lot of the activity is still coming up. And then today, through Anand, we have apparently a variety of topics with Dr. Sanjeev Kagram, our board chair, but also with Global Chamber. So we've got somebody who's in the healthcare side of things and has largely a medical healthcare life sciences incubator, and she helps them mainly come into the U.S. and enter the U.S. market. And then typically, right, they start to grow, they start to get clients, they need real estate, it ties, they need legal, they need a variety of other things. Jevon Hodge is another speaker. He is he's a politician, but he's also a leader. He's part of now, besides Global Chamber and being on our Phoenix Advisory Board, he's part of something called the Festival of the Diaspora, which is kind of a cool idea. It's been on for several years. I think 2022 was the first one, and it's this year in Puerto Rico, lo and behold. And last year, I believe it was in Colombia. But he'll be talking about some of his ESG initiatives. Dr. Kagram and he met at the UN during the big meetings week in September and talked to the UN Secretary General and others on the initiatives that they're doing. We have a company that I met through connecting, as you guys pointed out, in Phoenix, and met actually the London and Partners people and also the British government supporting a variety of British companies in the US, a company called Intique, which takes train cars, train engines, and converts them to hydrogen. So I'm not sure what the real estate activity there is, other than probably they needed some property to be able to do that and a variety of other things, and as all of these businesses do. Chris Yap is another speaker, and he's talking about how they're taking leaders from around the world and have access to companies. So you as a company can hire a variety of leaders. There's a company called Forced Physics, which has a cooling system for data centers that reduces carbon and water, significant amount of less water used. And then Dan Chang, who also has a cooling technology for buildings. And so the connection there, Jim, is from business to real estate and to a variety of support. And that's where we try to be a bridge. And thank you for being a bridge by being so present. And Paul, thank you again. What would you like to cover next? We only have a few minutes, I think.
I think, unless Paul, you have final words, we could do a closing out, but we hope to build a database of referrals for brokerage services, knowledge and information, connecting people. And I know London's on the call. So Paul, I'm sure we'll connect with the London Global Chamber, and Cesar is so great with connecting everyone. But Paul, do you have any final words for everyone here?
No, you're quite right there in terms of connecting with Doug. The other people I was connecting with, obviously, the London event was organised jointly with Go Global, so I'm in touch with the Go Global people as well,
Cool.
and that's important. But it's all about linking those connections up, and really, I suppose I know it sounds obvious, but it's sort of satisfying need, because there's you mentioned COP30 then. There is so much going on that it's easy to get totally snowed under by it all. And it really is a point from our point of view of actually identifying with the connections where the real need is, and actually being there to support them. And from what I've said, that London has the time zone wise and everything else, and English speaking, etc. It still tends to be the bridge between the USA and the rest of the world and mainland Europe. So hence the reason why I get involved in a lot of the European. Not I sit in London and the UK, but as you know from what I've said earlier, I'm operating all over Europe with clients. So anybody that has a need, more than happy to for them to come to me, and I can make the connections.
Brilliant.
And I just go ahead, Doug.
No, just brilliant. And thank you very much. I'm not sure Zainab El Karo was in that meeting. She was traveling in the UAE, and a lot of her activity is in GCC. But she's our new executive director there. Katie Keith is taking over as our advisory board chair for the London chapter. And so definitely look forward to involving you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for
No,
today.
not at all. Not at all.
And Paul, thank you again. And Doug, thank you for the vision of Global Chamber. And we look with Globi now coming out to organize and collect data of who's part of our organization association with Global Chamber at the local level, the regional level, the national and worldwide level to connect and put pieces together. So we're excited with the real estate part of Global Chamber to really get organized. So there's going to be tremendous amount of value. So I'm just glad, as Donna, thank you again by showing up. Now you made a great connection with Paul Danks for your SIOR. And when you do get pinned, I will fly out to see you get your SIOR. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be around every Wednesday except for holidays that I got an email from. And we look forward to connecting the world together through Global Chamber and real estate. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sophie.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.